have a really special guest speaker, Jennie Wong from Southeast Business.
And Jennie Wong will be talking to you guys today about 7 ways to hack the mind of the online shopper. So this is a really great opportunity for you guys to learn a little bit more about e-commerce and what the consumers are thinking when they're shopping online for different products and services. So without further ado, let's introduce Jennie Wong.
And Jennie graduated from USC as well.
Yeah.
Years ago,
Yes, that's actually my whole opening. So, I got my Ph.D. from Annenberg in organizational communication 20 years ago. And it is a true pleasure to be back here with you all today. Thank you so much to Sam and Tony and Carolyn for organizing the event. Anyone who says you can't go home again is not a USC Trojan. So you absolutely can come home again, and it's delightful. So what I'm going to share with you today is basically the entire contents, other than the bibliography and citations, of my new book, 7 Ways to Hack the Mind of the Online Shopper. So it is this little paperback, and as you can see, it is very slim in its form factor, and it is a lot of white space and screenshots. So at the end of today's session, you will have basically all of the key points from inside of the book. If you would like it in paper, it's available on Amazon for like $9. And if you're on a student budget, I will be happy to send you the PDF for free. So, all I ask is that if you enjoy or find the information that you hear today to be useful, it would be great if you went on to Amazon to leave me an honest and candid review for the book. Okay, so diving in. Why now, right? Why at this particular moment in the year 2016 are we all here in this room giving up our lunch hours to learn about hacking the mind of the online shopper? Well, the number one reason is because e-commerce is eating the economy. Pretty soon, we're just going to call it commerce, right? The entire online world of business, both in B2B and B2C, is moving online, right? And the trend is really clear. It's still not a majority of the economy, but with the trend continuing and accelerating, now is the moment to really understand the consumer psychology of online shopping. Another really important reason to understand this is because the devices are changing, right? So not only is e-commerce eating the economy, mobile is eating e-commerce. Very recently, we hit that tipping point where the majority of traffic started to come, to Google searches, started to come from mobile devices instead of desktop. And we're moving on to ever more and varied devices, right? So we're going to wearables, we're going to, voice-activated things, we're going to things that are pretty soon going to be implanted in our bodies. And so this is the moment also to understand that the answer to successful sales and successful business is not in the device. It's not about the hardware. The actual piece of hardware that we shop with and make buying decisions with, that we make decisions with, period, is the hardware that's between our ears, right? The human brain is actually the piece of hardware that we need to understand, irrespective of what we're holding in our hands, wearing on our wrists, or have embedded in our glasses or into our brains directly pretty soon. So I wanted to tell you just really quickly about my background so you can understand the perspective that I'm coming from and sort of where all these bits and pieces came from originally and then coalesced into sort of these 7 ways that I'm going to share with you today. So my first chapter, as I've already alluded to, was in academia. So I went straight through. I originally thought that I was going to be tenure track professor. So I got my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, and I received that doctorate from Annenberg when I was just 22 years old. So I have been a trained social scientist literally my entire adult life. But as I was writing my dissertation, I realized that I actually probably was not going to go onto a tenured professor track, and sort of made my first change, my first sort of course change, and pivoted into a career in consulting. I was really interested in organizations, so I spent the next decade of my life as a management consultant in the Fortune 500. So it's sort of a dated reference now, but I say if you've seen the movie Office Space, I was one of the Bobs. And what I did in the Fortune 500 was I consulted. It's called organization development consulting, but it's essentially human behavior change, right? Trying to get employees to do what you want them to do, to change what they're currently doing to the thing that's going to be the more optimized type of performance. And it turns out that a lot of that information about brain-based employee behavior change is really applicable to brain-based consumer behavior change because it's all the same equipment. After about 10 years of that, I entered my current chapter, which is as an entrepreneur. And this happened, of course, for sort of a whole variety of personal reasons, but it includes the fact that I met and married a web developer, a full-stack e-commerce engineer. And so when the time came for us to start a family, I also decided it was the time for me to join the family business, which was our web development shop called Limelight Web Development. And then eventually, out of all of that experience of building everybody else's e-commerce site, we decided to launch our own startup in this space, right? So instead of just selling services, we started to create this tool, which is now called Shopping Quizzes. So Shopping Quizzes is a full-service quiz provider for agencies and retailers. And it's based on, I couldn't help it, right? It's based on all of those years of reading social science journals and going through all of those experiences with changing human behavior for large corporations. So of course it's built on top of all of that, right? How could it not have been? But when I'm presenting the tool and the solution of Shopping Quizzes, I get asked a lot, well, this is so simple. Why does it have such engagement power? Why does it have such conversion power? And so I was answering the question off the cuff again and again. And then finally I thought, I should really sit down and write this down. And I thought I just had a really long blog post, and it turned out I had a really short book. And the reason that I'm presenting it here today is because learning the 7 ways to hack the mind of the online shopper is actually useful even if you don't sell online, right? Even if you're talking about sales in a face-to-face situation, or even if you don't do sales at all and you're just looking to be more persuasive, these are going to be things that you can apply. Now, the examples you're about to see are all from the world of e-commerce, but I think it's a pretty short hop. And you guys are obviously a very bright bunch of graduate students. You'll be able to see how you can apply these 7 ways, even if you're just trying to, sort of win the battle of what are we going to eat for dinner tonight. Okay, I promise it'll be useful for all of that as well. And then the final disclaimer before we jump into the 7 ways is that every seller, every website, every product, every situation is different. Okay, so not every principle you're about to see is necessarily going to be appropriate. If you're currently selling online, if you have private clients or friends that you're helping out with their e-commerce sites, not every single one of these things is necessarily going to apply. However, these cognitive principles can help you either understand why something is or isn't working, and it can help you generate hypotheses, which then can be rigorously tested for your particular buyer, product, website, situation, etc. Okay. So now my lawyers are happy. So this is it. These are the 7 ways. These are all 7 right here. Right? Number 1, paradox of choice. It's very important to understand. One of the most important things to understand, which is what it goes first. Processing fluency, which will explain that. Just-in-time information, which is a great example of how we've been able to synthesize cross-disciplinary understanding of how human beings learn and then act. Micro-commitments, simultaneous trace presentation, the compromise effect, and reactive theory. So that's just a little preview. Obviously, we're going to get into each and every single one. At a high level, what you're going to walk away with, like if you only remember one slide, right? This is the slide to remember. This is it right here, right? The brain does not like to be overwhelmed. The brain does not like reading and processing and remembering a lot of dense, hard-to-read text. My apologies to your professors. The brain does not like being told what to do. Insert your own joke here. And the brain also doesn't particularly love extremes, right? They feel risky. from a sort of evolutionary standpoint. What the brain does like is fewer and better choices, easy to process visuals, because the visual cortex is far older in the human brain than the neocortex, which is where language resides. The brain also likes freedom, or you can think of it as optionality. Tim Ferriss calls it optionality. And the brain also actually tends to like happy mediums. Okay, so here we go. Number one, the paradox of choice. In a nutshell, the more choices we have, the less likely we are to buy anything at all, right? And this is a very important concept to understand, whether you're selling online or you're just trying to be persuasive, okay? Because usually your biggest competition is not an alternative retailer. It's actually inaction, right? Your biggest enemy in whatever it is that you're trying to do is inertia, not the competitor, not the other product. It's just walking away, okay? So you will recognize this by a lot of more common names, right? People talk about analysis paralysis. One of the great sort of learn more links that's in the back of this deck and in the back of the book is the New York Times article, Do You Have Decision Fatigue? Very, very popular article from a few years ago. Certain researchers talk about this as ego depletion. And then Nobel Prize winning author out of Princeton, Daniel Kahneman, calls this System 1 and System 2 thinking. Right? They're all touching on and around using different words for the same core concept. So this is the key study, right? If this is the one that you want to really remember out of all the work that's been published out there, and it's called the JAM study. So this was done by Dr. Shana Iyengar and her colleague up in Northern California. They basically walked into, this was a flesh and blood study, they walked into a real brick and mortar grocery store in an affluent suburb of the Bay Area, and they set up a table and they put out 6 jams, 6 gourmet jams. And shoppers at the grocery store could walk up to the table, they could taste the jams, they could buy the jams. And about 30% of the people who walked up to the jams walked away with a purchase, right? A few weeks later, they switched it up. Same grocery store, same table, same shoppers. But now they had 24 jams on that table. Same deal. You can walk up to the jams, you can taste the jams, you can buy the jams, but suddenly they sell 90% less jams, right? This is really important for e-commerce because we've never had more choices, right? In the digital world in general, in terms of content, information, whether it's about a product or about a position, there's never been a more overwhelming time of information and choices. So how do you apply this learning in e-commerce? Well, one of the things you can do if you have an e-commerce site is try not to show long scrolling pages of thumbnail images, right? This starts to feel like it's endless, right? And this is a really easy and almost guaranteed way to overwhelm the shopper, and we know that that's going to lead to inaction. What you could do instead is just show a handful of the most popular options and then invite them to drill down and see more, right? And so this is where you start to see something that I'm going to talk about several times, which is this idea of funneling down, right? Instead of keeping them at the top of the funnel, invite them to take an action that will allow them to start drilling down, which puts them closer to the purchase and closer to the action. Yes?
And do you find that this is like fundamentally more effective than a pagination type system?
This is sort of like in addition to pagination.
Okay.
Right? And so, you know, when you look at a typical category page, right, you're going to see that they show, you know, let's say 20 thumbnails on that page. Maybe it's 24 thumbnails on that page. Maybe it's 50. Plus there's pagination, right?
Got it.
And so not only might you want to reduce the number that they're seeing on a single page by increasing the pagination, but you might also want to consider this as an alternative, right? So that when they click see more, now maybe they're on a page that's just shirt dresses. And that has really already started them in the funnel instead of that all dresses page. And we've all been on that page, right? It's like every dress Nordstrom sells. Okay, that's not super helpful. Like I need one dress. I don't need to see all 6,000 dresses on Nordstrom.com, right? But at least if I'm starting to work my way into just the shirt dresses, you start to experience that sensation of getting closer to your goal, okay?
Thank you.
Another thing that retailers do that actually makes the problem worse is they'll do duplicate thumbnails, right? So this is my pet peeve with VictoriaSecret.com, right? They already have a lot of options, right? VictoriaSecret.com already has a lot of SKUs in every category: swim, intimates, apparel, right? And yet they'll do this crazy thing where they will show the same shirt in a thumbnail on a category page in each of the colors, as if they needed to impress me how much more that they have than they even actually have. And so now I have to kind of squint and lean forward and work way harder than I want to work at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night to figure out, is this shirt the same as this shirt? Does this one have a pocket? Like, why are they different? I would much rather that they did this, right? Show me the shirt in one good shot that shows the detail, right? Show me the neckline, show me if there's a pocket, fine. And then just show me the swatching, right? And then if I decide I like the cut of the shirt, then I'll go in and I'll select the color, right? So it's making it more sequential. Another thing is deep linking. So this is a best practice that needs to become more widespread, is that when you're touting something specific, like this segment of wireless bras, what happens here is if I were to click shop bras, it takes me all the way back up to all bras, right? But the reason I clicked on it is I was hoping it was just going to show me wireless bras. So deep linking is a really good best practice and is highly recommended. And if you understand the paradox of choice, then you understand why this is a good idea, right? Because if you didn't understand the paradox of choice, you might say, but wait, if I take you just to wireless bras, what if you miss out on all of the other styles that we have, right? Not realizing that there's a price to that, right? Retailers, businesses, startups, nobody wants to leave money on the table, right? So you have to really understand that it's not free. Showing me everything you sell is not free. There's a price for that, and you want to calculate if it's worth it or not, right? Yes, you might be leaving the sale of a, whatever, sports bra on the table. That's true. There is a risk of that. But if you have vastly increased the odds that I will buy nothing, then you need to do your math in a different way. Okay. So that was the paradox of choice, and thank you for your question. I love the interaction, so if you have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to raise your hand and ask. I'm happy to pause, and of course there'll be time for questions at the end as well. Okay, so processing fluency. What the heck is processing fluency? So when information is faster and easier to process, we like it better. We also tend to like the person better who's giving it to us, or the entity better that's giving us the information. But here's the really important thing. We're more likely to take action, right? So if you can make information fast and easy to process, we're going to like it better, and you're going to increase our likelihood of taking action. And you will be maybe a little bit surprised at all of the things that can actually create speed bumps to processing fluency. Some people talk about it as like brain cycles. The researcher might call it conceptual fluency, processing speed, and then there's like a really specific type of processing fluency called rhyme as reason bias. And so, advertising journals will talk about it. Experienced salespeople will sometimes talk about this. Okay, so here's one of the classic studies on processing fluency. So this was obviously done back in the day because we're talking about cordless phones. But what's really interesting is that this is actually researching an online purchase, right? So I apologize because this is not the graphics here are not as high res as I would like them to be. But basically, they're given the information here in like a nice normal font. Okay, that's what this is supposed to represent, even if it looks the same on the projector. This condition here is like the exact same information, but the font is like blurry. It's like, do you ever click like the shadow option on like Microsoft Word or something, like italics or shadow? So it's basically kind of like a blurred, slightly double vision looking type of font, right? That's the only difference, right? But once again, what you see is the proclivity to action. They really move the needle on that, right? 41% just deferred, just like I can't make a decision, I'm not going to pick either. Versus here, 83% were able to actually just pick one of the cordless phones already, right? So even a small perceptual difficulty that decreases the sensation of fluency, right? Ease, the ease of reading it, the ease of processing it can have a huge and what might seem almost like a disproportionate effect on your success in sales. So there are a lot of different ways you can influence processing fluency. One is to avoid jargon, right? So like right here, this is from, I believe, petboys.com. This is a live screen cap from a few months ago. Now, I'm relatively mechanical myself. I'm not scared of my car. I know where the oil goes. But I don't know what hydro-traded paraffinific means, right? And so if I see that, I'm just going to bail on the whole purchase, right? Because I don't really feel like researching that or looking it up or trying, I have a lot of other things going on I have to worry about in my life. And so when I hit this kind of a speed bump, the easiest thing for me to do, the path of least resistance, is to say, forget it, I'll let Jiffy Lube do it, so I'm not going to buy it. In the opposite direction, here's something that you can do that really is helpful, right? Once again, surprisingly helpful, and that's alliteration and rhyming. So wherever possible, right, if you are the marketer, if you are if you're helping to name something, if you're helping with a slogan, if you're naming a campaign, if you're determining, what something's going to be called, like this week-long promotion, take the extra 30 minutes and brainstorm the hell out of alliterations and rhymes that you could possibly come up with. Now, I'm not saying, be cheesy, jam a square peg into a round hole, but I'm saying if you can figure it out in an extra 30 minutes, it will be so worth it, right? Because things that are alliterative and that rhyme not only are more easily remembered, they are liked better. And they are actually, it even gives them an allure of truth, right? Makes them seem like they're more credible if you can leverage that. And the reason that you have this rhyme as reason bias is because of processing fluency. It just makes it that much easier. And then finally, really blocking and tackling thing when it comes to e-commerce is the page loading speed, right? When you encounter an e-commerce site where it takes longer than 2 seconds for the page to load, right? It's like your brain hits like a little brick wall, right? It just doesn't feel good. Even if you don't have any rational reason for basing a purchasing decision on the loading speed, which maybe you don't, right? Because it's not telling you about the quality of the product, it's not telling you about the competitiveness of the price, but you just start to like it less because that page is loading slowly, right? And so I think we've all experienced this, viscerally, as, obviously we all live, online so much of our lives now. And so this is really a basic thing, and it gives you kind of an understanding of why it's so impactful, processing fluency. Okay, so that was way number 2. So now we're going to talk about the third way to hack the mind of the online shopper. And this is a trick called just-in-time information. So just-in-time information is a concept that is actually touched on in education, in psychology, and also in marketing. And so bringing all of those realms of understanding together, I think is really useful to understand that they're really all talking about the same thing. And nowadays, whatever it is that you're selling, it is quite possible that there is a educational component to closing the sale, right? That you have to teach the shopper a little something in order to get the deal, in order to win their business. They have to learn what paraphonitic means, or they have to understand and be educated about your advantage. They didn't understand something about the product, and that's why you have to educate them. So here's the thing, is that they're not going to absorb that information until they need the information. This is very basic adult learning theory, right? Relevance is what drives attention, retention, and also integration, right, into taking action based on the knowledge. So some of this research comes out of flipped classroom. Interactive engagement is a teaching style. Just-in-time theory of user behavior, or simply why people don't read on the web, right? A lot of companies are blogging, but there's no context for reading the blog. So they're blogging into the vacuum, right? They're just sort of shouting into, their Twitter feed, and nobody's listening. So this is a study on just-in-time processing that comes, just-in-time information that comes out of the realm of education. So they basically compared two sets of physics students. One set got traditional lecture, and I'm very aware of the irony that right now I'm doing traditional lecture. So, yeah, more questions would be great. So this is sort of where, you know, the students are sitting there, they're listening to the information. It's what everybody would recognize, right, as a traditional classroom setup. Versus another group of matched control students or matched experimental condition students were given interactive engagement. And so this is where they're given things like the test before the lecture. Right? This is where they are asked to actively be giving feedback and reactions to the information as they're getting it. And it's much more engaged and interactive versus passive and receptive. And what happened, of course, was that they had a big increase in their understanding. For a lot of companies, the difference between 23% increase in understanding and 48% increase in understanding is the difference between sale or no sale. So here's an example in the world of online shopping, right? So this is an example for window coverings, right? Now, I don't think anybody thinks of window coverings as being a super high-tech thing where you would need a lot of education. And yet, here's an opportunity to use just-in-time information, right? At the moment of choice or action, right? This is a navigation decision that you're being asked to make as the shopper. Did you want blinds or did you want shades, right? So what you can do right here is you can activate the more primitive visual cortex and show a photo of what do we mean by blinds, what do we mean by shades, right? And just reinforce it. There's nothing to read, and yet you're being given the information you need right in the moment that you're being asked to click one of these. By the way, blinds are made of stiff material, and shades are made of flexible material, I learned. What you should not expect your users to do is to go to a separate standalone blog post about blinds versus shades and to read that, right? Who wants to read that? So this is a great way to think about what information your shopper needs, but not just like what is the information, but when do they need it? At what exact, can you get as close as possible to the moment of action before you give it to them? Because otherwise it just kind of bounces off. Another way that you can do this is to provide the detailed product information and help after they're interested. So this is another example of sort of drilling down, right? So just like you might click see more shirt dresses after I show you 4 good examples of our most popular shirt dresses, I might click see more. Here, I'm on a product page, I'm already looking at this parka, right? I'm already interested in this parka. Now you can explain to me what your comfort ratings mean. Please don't try to tell me this on your homepage. Please don't try to get me to read a blog post on your comfort ratings and how you develop them in the absence of an imminent decision, right? Which is now I have to decide, is this parka warm enough for the trip I'm about to take, yes or no? Now I care. Yes.
How is this different than your previous example where you had them, what not to do was more information on the blinds? Like people would not want to go somewhere else to read additional information on blinds versus shades. It sounds very similar to what you're asking or what you're recommending here.
Oh, right. So that's a good question. So here, the technique, right, is that you put these visuals behind, like here's a picture of a shade, here's a picture of a blind, right? And so you're providing extra visual information in a just-in-time fashion, right? Versus saying like, well, these are text links, right? Because we all see those top-down navigation menus that are just text, right? And then saying, but I shouldn't have to explain it because on this completely other part of the site, I've explained it, right? So it's about the proximity of the information to the need for the information, right? Just like here, I don't need the essay about comfort readings until I'm actually looking probably at a specific parka that I like. Does that make sense?
So I guess to put the two ideas together, in the previous not recommended situation, if you were to just add like a link or if you were to click on blinds or shades, then it would lead to an explanation of the difference between the two, then you would be following the recommendation.
I think she's saying you wouldn't need that because the visuals tell the story. But she's saying here you can contextualize deeper information if it's needed.
Yeah, you can layer and combine the techniques, right? And decide what is more preferred for your situation, right? So the difference between a blind and a shade can actually just be explained using like two different pictures, right? Like one's a rolly thing and one's a louvery thing, right? Whereas with comfort ratings, maybe you can't express it with just like a clear visual, right? Like I'm a little cold, I'm a lot cold. Maybe that's not as easy to visually express, right? But this is about sort of, different concepts that can be layered, right? It's not just like a single application that works for every situation. Yeah. Yes?
This feels like a really simple question, but I've noticed that when you have the about or offering information about how things are organized, some companies make that really small and hard to find. Other companies make that a little bit more noticeable. Is the goal, I guess, you obviously want to make it more noticeable, but you don't want to intrude on their area of vision. So where would you typically put it? Would you put it right next to it? Would you put it down below? Would you just, how would you organize it that way?
Okay, your question is about how to present information that's about the company. You're talking about the company profile stuff?
So for this item, for example, about comfort ratings,
Yes.
It feels intuitive that you would just have that fairly noticeable, but I've noticed a lot of companies sometimes when there's a particular way they're organizing or showing the information, they will just have that particular informative piece off to the side, the link to it off to the side, or fairly inaccessible where you have to sort of look for it and see if they're...
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously not preferred, right? Because what you want to understand is your shopper's job to be done, right? You want to understand how your shopper is most likely to be navigating to a purchase, right? And then there's going to be a moment where they're going to care. And you want to make it adjacent to that moment, right? So here's a really good example. Here's one that a lot of companies get right, is they put payment information right next to where people are trying to pay, right? If there's one thing that a lot of companies have paid attention to, it's their checkout pages, right? Their checkout flows. And so this is where you see it done properly, and this kind of user experience can be applied to other parts of the shopping process, right? So like right when you need to know like, oh, what's CVV? Where do I find the CVV on my credit card? Well, now every single checkout page tells you where the CVV number is on your credit card page. And where do they tell it to you? Right next to the field you need to fill out, right? They put that little I in the circle right next to the field where they are insisting you must type in 3 numbers right here, right? And then now we'll tell you where to find it. Before you get to that point, you don't care where your CVV number is on your credit card, right? So just apply that kind of thinking, right, to the overall online shopping experience. Does that make sense? Yes.
So when you're talking about brands that have blogs and they're basically blogging to absolutely nobody, you find that so often marketers are creating blogs to, not only create sort of thought leadership, but then to also help their SEO rankings. Do you find that your approach that you're talking about where, sort of less is more, in the moment, contextual, does that have a trade-off when it comes to SEO?
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, that's an entirely different purpose, right? Like, thought leadership, and you're catching that person, right, at a different portion of their journey, right? So if someone is doing research, right, about, like, are blinds or shades more energy efficient? And they type that into Google and you've nailed that SEO and you've got the blog post on whether blinds or shades are more energy efficient, that's great. That's perfect. They're going to come to you. They're going to read that. They may not be that close to a purchase right then, right? If you have another blog post that is about, I don't know, like the 5, style advantages of Roman shades, you might want to link that on the product pages for Roman shades, because it might just push someone over the edge. Like they're already looking at a Roman shade, and then they go, oh wait, there's like a checklist of like the 5 reasons that they're great. I'll read that right now because I'm about to buy it, right? And then after I read it, I'll say like, okay, now I'm ready. See what I'm saying? So those are really, blog posts are not a thing, right? Blog posts are just blog posts is basically just content, right? So there's going to be content that's further up the funnel when someone's just doing general research, like, should I get an electric car? That's not someone that's close to buying an electric car, right? But someone that's saying, you know, like Nissan Leaf range, Vegas. Like, that's someone that's close to buying the car. Like, can I get to Vegas in this Leaf, right? Because if I can, I'm going to buy it. And if I can't, I have to keep looking, right? So those are very different blog posts, so you would link them and offer them in really different contexts. Another thing about just-in-time information is that if you can offer it via like live chat, a lot of companies have found that this converts really well, right? For obvious reasons now, because the moment you have a question, that's when you're receptive to the answer, right? That's when you're going to remember it. That's when you're going to like appreciate it. Any other time that it's being sort of like shouted at you, you don't respond the same way. Okay. So now we come to number 4. Yes.
For the live chat stuff, some pages when you go on it, it already like pops up and says like, "What are you looking for today?" That kind of gets annoying.
That's right.
Is there? So that's probably something you should stay away from, right? Is it only when you start clicking around and then you notice that the person's trying to look at stuff? Is that when you should start popping that message out, or?
You know, that's a really good question, and I don't have an evidence-based answer to that that's going to be correct for all situations, right? But the fact that you say that's annoying, right? That's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point of just-in-time information, right? Because what you're saying is that as a shopper, when something is thrust upon you and it's too soon, you just want to dismiss it, and it's just a little bit irritating, right? And so each site, each product, each shopper is a puzzle. You're going to try and optimize for a really specific customer journey as to when you might want to, like, you know, have that chat window pop, right? If at all, and you just might need to test that. Sorry, that's like the cop-out answer of everything. You should test that. So, okay, way 4, micro commitments. Yes.
Sorry for that. What would you say for customers who are a little bit more educated beforehand? So just, for example, the comfort level. Someone goes into the website, they know they need to figure out the comfort level that they need before they even look at specific garments. Would you say that you would have, you know, that information still available, like somewhere on the homepage for them to find, or would that be kind of like redundant, you know, if you wanted to put it on specific garments? You know what I'm saying?
So, I mean, if you have an online business where the vast majority of people are coming to your site to place an order because they already know everything they need to know, then you're going to optimize that flow really differently, right? But for a lot of people, you know, like North Face, right? Like they want to educate you on like why would you buy synthetic fill versus natural down, right? They need to educate you. But if they try to do that before you care, it's not going to work. Right? But if you have a different type of business model where it's an informed consumer that's just coming to place an order, then by all means, make that information sort of off to the side and less intrusive. Yeah. But be sure that they really know everything they need to know.
If you wouldn't put like, well, that's what I'm pretty much asking. I mean, let's say if I wanted to go in and I'm looking specifically to know what the comfort levels are, I'm not thinking about, okay, let me go into a specific garment and then I'll find it. I will look for it, wouldn't find it.
Oh yeah, I mean, like having information available or linked from more than one place is a really good practice. Absolutely, yeah. You want to, I mean, there are best practices in site search, right, where I should be able to type into site search, you know, comfort level, or how warm of a parka do I need, or what's the warmest. Like, all those things should return the correct page of information, because I'm actively seeking it. That means it's relevant to me right then, that is exactly the moment I'm at, right? So best practices in site search should address that. Okay. All right, good. Micro commitments. Baby steps, right? Seemingly small steps can greatly increase the odds of a big commitment. If you guys have read Cialdini's Influence, he refers to this as commitment and consistency. There's relevant research that's categorized under the endowment effect. Salespeople might call this foot in the door technique, and also hoop theory, which just means getting people to jump through some hoops will make them, you know, sort of like the thing more at the end. So the classic study on this was done a few decades ago with a phone call asking the lady of the house if she would be willing to allow, representatives from the California Consumer Product Agency, not a real thing, to come to her house and inventory all of her cleaning products. And it would be like having, strangers tromping through her house, and it would take a few hours, right? So the odds of people saying yes to this, as you can imagine, was relatively low. However, if they preceded that call with an initial micro-commitment and said, hi, we're calling from the California Consumer Product Group, and we'd like to, ask you a few questions. Would you be willing to talk to us for 10 minutes on the phone and tell us what kind of cleaning products you're currently using? If they said yes to that initial request, if they received that initial request, the odds of them saying yes to the big request later was increased by a lot. And this finding has been duplicated also with political lawn signs, right? So that if you go around a neighborhood first, which is very relevant to where we are right now with the election next month, if you go around to a neighborhood first and you ask people if they'll put a little discreet sticker for the candidate in their window, or proposition, right? Forget candidates, right? Prop whatever, 1, 2, 3. Will you put this little sticker in your window for Prop 1, 2, 3? If you can get them to say yes to that, and then you come back a week later and ask them if they will put a 6-foot banner on their lawn, you've actually increased their chances of saying yes to that, right? Because they're making sense of their yes as already having some kind of, I'm the type of person that would do that, right? So you can really move the needle with an initial small request. Think of it as a slippery slope, right? That first little baby step creates a slippery slope. How do you apply this with online sales? Well, one thing that you can do is build commitment to a first purchase by first getting them to accept something for free, right? So it could be download a guide, or watch this video, or like us on Facebook, right? An initial small commitment before the purchase can greatly increase your odds of closing a larger purchase. There is an e-commerce startup that is doing this in a really cool way. They are called, I believe they're called Benchmade, and they sell custom couches. So they want to sell you a $3,000 couch from their website that you've never sat on. And the way they do that is with a series of micro commitments, right? So the first thing, so they don't think you're going to jump from, hi, I just found this company online that makes custom couches, to here's my $3,000, send me the couch, right? That's too big of a gap. So they start to build the slippery slope. The first thing they want you to do is order a fabric swatch. Let us send you a piece of fabric, right? Check out the color, touch the fabric. It's this big. It arrives in a normal envelope. Let us send you that. That's the first conversion, right? That's the first micro commitment. After they've done that, they want you to order a full-size, 6-foot paper template that you're going to roll out in your apartment that's the exact length and measurement of the couch you're interested in. So it comes in a poster roll. We're still talking about paper, relatively light, relatively cheap. And only after they've sent you that template, now they're going to try and convert you to the full purchase of the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 couch that you've never sat on. So think about how can you be building micro commitments and creating a slippery slope with an initial small yes. Even if you don't sell online, even if you're not doing retail, even if it's just in your personal lives, right? How can you get an initial small commitment from the person that you're trying to persuade that will help grease the wheels for the larger commitment that you're actually trying to get the yes to? See price and cart is an extra, is sort of like a strategy, because then it takes an extra step to take it back out of your cart after you've seen the price. And then this is one of my favorite examples. This is a skincare website called Paula's Choice that I shop at personally, and one of the reasons I love it is because they'll sell me a sample for 80 cents, right? I will totally buy that 80-cent sample before I commit to $40 for the full-size retinol product, right? I really like that because I don't want to know after that purchase that it breaks me out. Yes?
For something like this, though, do companies, what do you do with shipping and handling costs for sending such a small sample?
Well, so you do need to calculate the economics of it, right? And so in this case, shipping is very cheap because we're talking about a little beauty sample, right? And so in this case, I don't know their economics, but presumably this is close to break even for them, right? Whereas for the couch, they have to be making enough margin on that couch to justify all the fabric swatches and all the poster rolls that they're sending of the people who don't end up converting, right? So it has a lot to do with your margin, right? And once again, that's going to be different for every seller. And this is one of the reasons that you need to have sufficient margin in your business model, right? Is to allow for stuff like this. Yes?
Is getting someone to sign up for an email distribution a micro commitment?
Yes, it absolutely is, for sure. Yes?
Would your two examples for these microtransactions cater towards different customer demographics? Like for this example, the cheap, almost free sample caters towards very price-conscious people, as opposed to your previous example for the sneakers and for the amp. It looks like when you have to click for the price, it almost triggers like a warning sign in my head, thinking like if I have to ask, I can't afford it kind of mentality. So then it's almost like you're scaring away the price-conscious people. Is that true?
I think different brands appeal to different shoppers on sort of the price-value continuum, right? Like if you have a brand that is luxury, right, then you know that your shoppers are going to be looking more for, sort of those elements versus like free shipping or what have you, right? Whereas if you are Target.com, then you know that you have someone that's, relatively value conscious. And so you're going to need to figure out how to make those micro commitments in a way that facilitates their particular reason for buying, right? Because if I'm shopping at a luxury site, maybe what I'm worried about is not paying shipping for the sample. What I'm worried about is something very different, that the fabric's going to look cheap. Right? Whereas here, I'm worried about wasting $40 on a bottle of skin cream that I'm going to have to throw away or pass on to a girlfriend because it breaks me out, right? So yeah, like I'm shopping on this site because like this is my budget, right? If I'm shopping on a different site, then my concerns are going to be different, right? So you should obviously tailor it, but it's the brand that's going to draw the customer profile, right? So it's a macro issue. Yes?
So how would you, so I know that different micro commitments might elicit different reactions from different customers. I know
That's right.
from personal experience, if you ask me to download a video, I might do that. If you ask me to subscribe to an email list, that's a no. I cannot stand any more.
That's right.
So how do you, rank different types of micro commitments? And do you have a range of them so that if one or two of them might scare away certain customers, these other ones won't? Or do you?
Yeah, if you can come up with more than one way to get your prospect headed down the slippery slope, great, right? If they're all appropriate to your customer profile, to your product, to your branding, if there's more than one way in, fantastic, right? Because somebody might say, hey, I really love getting codes, right? Like those discount codes, like the honey codes, the retail me not codes. Someone might say, I love those. I would gladly give you my email address if you're going to send me codes, right? I love codes, right? Someone else might say, you cannot pay me to add one more marketing email to my list. I don't care if you're going to give me a code for $50 off. Like, I would rather you keep it and don't email me, right? But they might do something else, like watch a video, right? So that's absolutely correct, right? More than one way in, it would be better. And then, by the same token, once they're down the slippery slope, keep them going, right? Keep that momentum going. If inertia was your enemy, now momentum is your friend. So if somebody's made a purchase, now see if you can convert them to join your club, become a member, be an advocate, right? Okay. Way 5, simultaneous choice presentation. I am going to go a tiny bit faster because I want to be respectful of your time. Simultaneous choice presentation basically says that people are happier with their decisions when they can see all of their options at once versus having to say yes or no to a sequence that's being presented to them. Maximizing versus satisficing is something you may have heard of. Choice closure, option attachment, right? But I think that this study illustrates something that's actually very modern, right? So this is an older study about chocolates where people were asked to pick their favorite chocolate. And in one situation, they were given all 5 chocolates all at once, and they had access to them, they could taste them, and they could pick their favorite chocolate. And their satisfaction was higher than in the circumstance where people were given the chocolates to taste one at a time. So then when they were done with the first one, they would get the second one. When they were done with the second one, they would get the third one. And they were done with the third one, etc. And then they had to pick their favorite. They were not as satisfied with their choice in that situation. And I think this is really, the easiest way to remember this is to think about Tinder, right? So modern dating is like Tinder. There's an endless sequence of choices, right? Whereas old-fashioned dating was simultaneous choice presentation, right? Like you were born in a town, right? There were only so many people around your age that were appropriate for you in that town. You could sort of see at a glance, these are my choices. You would pick one, and and research says that satisfaction was higher with those decisions because you knew all your choices. You knew you made the best choice because you got to see all 5 possible boys in your town that were about your age, right? Now what do you have? You have an endless possibility of choices. So why would you ever declare yourself satisfied with the one in front of you, because you never know what the next one might be. How does this apply to online shopping, right? Well, if you can show side-by-side comparisons, right, this will really help your customers to be able to see high-level categories at a glance, right? This is very logical. This feels good to the brain, right? Like, I need a swimsuit, And basically, there's just these 3 kinds, right? There's like the kind that's connected, the kind that's not connected, and the kind, that has the big gap in them. I mean, these are just sort of like very basic segments. And then from there, I can start drilling down. And instantly, with that first choice, I'm deeper in the funnel, right? Because I've already made that one decision. If you can do this kind of product comparison device, this is also very good at a glance, side-by-side product comparisons. And what you want to avoid is this perception of an endless sequence, right? If you go into Zappos, and even if you know that you want a pair of black flats in size 7, it feels endless. Who can look at 734 pairs of black flats that are all already in your size, right? It feels endless, and it feels like you can't do a good job. So that doesn't feel very good, right? You can't do your due diligence on a set that is this large. The 6th way to hack the mind of the online shopper is called the compromise effect. So the compromise effect says that given a set of options, people often choose the happy medium, right? And this is a great sort of Jedi mind trick if you are selling online. It goes by a lot of different names, which you can read for yourself there. But this is what it basically boils down to, right? When shown 2 shredders, right, people will tend to buy the $57 shredder instead of the $75 shredder. However, you can really move that needle by offering them a higher priced shredder that anchors the $75 shredder as the middle option, right? So you can make this offering without intending to sell any of them, right? If you offer this shredder and you sell exactly none of them, you have still increased your average order value. Yes?
Maybe I'm missing something, but why would you need a 3rd option if they're already going for the 75 or 2 option?
No, 21% are purchasing the $75 shredder.
Oh, so.
And in this condition, you have a 71% increase to 36% of people choosing the $75 shredder. Right? So you want to think about what you do in terms of positioning your products and your brand. You can position your brand between competitors, right? Like this one, is maybe too cheap. This one's maybe too expensive. Can you position yourself as the one that's just right, the happy medium, the Goldilocks? You can also use explicit triggers on your website to actually mark something as best value, most popular, top selling, highest rated, right? Because people are looking for those shortcuts. Happy medium is one of the shortcuts, and then you can even double down on that by actually labeling something as sort of, the one that's right for most people. And here's the other thing that's really magical about giving your customers any kind of a short list, right? Is that if you show any 3 options to somebody, they can, in their own minds, make a happy medium out of it. And 2 different shoppers can apply their own personal sense of what is a happy medium, right? So you and I might look at these 3 dresses, right? And I might pick the one that's the happy medium between sexy and comfortable, right? You might pick the happy medium between the prices, right? You might say, well, that one's too little and that one's too much, and I'll pick the one that's the one, that is the medium on price, right? Everybody can bring their own definition, right? This one is too conservative, this one's too edgy. I'll pick the one that looks like it's on trend but still conservative enough to be professional in the middle. Everyone can bring their own definition. So that's really a great tool to use. The 7th and final way to hack the mind of the online shopper is reactive spirity. So you can think of it as simply reverse psychology, but what it really boils down to is that people don't like to have their freedom taken away, right? They dislike restrictions on the freedom, and the flip side of that is they love affirmations of their ability to choose. They love affirmations of their free will. And so this is known as the "you are free" technique, and also think about whether or not you're triggering any kind of rebelliousness in your shopper. So this study was done actually in France. And so they had a group of basically clean-cut college students asking people at the mall for change for the bus, change to take the bus. And in one condition, they simply asked for change for the bus, and in the other condition, they would follow that request by saying, but of course, it's totally up to you, but you are free to choose whether or not you give me any change for the bus. And simply by adding that, not only did they increase their compliance rate, they also increased the amount of money that they were giving, because it sort of took away that sense of pressure, right? And so then if you feel like, oh, well, this is totally up to me, this person's not going to pressure me, right? This person is affirming my free will, then I'm actually more likely to comply. So you want to be careful with this when you're giving a product recommendation. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you go through a process on a website and then they say, like, this is the one you should buy. And then you have that feeling of like, you don't know me. Don't tell me what to buy. I know I answered your questions, but still, right? Like, why are you telling me to buy that one? It's suspicious, right? So you want to avoid triggering that reactance, right? So that's called reactance. What you can do instead, now this obviously isn't very visual, right? This doesn't follow the other best practices of appealing to the visual cortex, but this one gives you a handful to choose from, right? And this is actually quite a lot of options, but it is somewhat whittled down from the universe of like all strollers, right? So this feels like maybe with these choices, I could actually do some of my own due diligence, and it's a helpful step in the right direction. Also, you know, people sometimes, they don't want to be labeled with a certain style persona, right? So maybe I think, you know, new traditional is an oxymoron. Maybe I don't like the word eclectic, right? Maybe I don't consider myself to be shabby chic, even if I did click on a certain series of options. So be careful with that. Be careful with labeling your customers. And instead, consider asking more objective questions, like, what are you looking for today in a sofa, leather or fabric? That might be way better for your conversions than, oh, what's your style? And of course, a good return policy also enforces optionality, right? This is one of the reasons I try to always reinforce with shopping quizzes that our service is cancel anytime, because I feel like that frees people up to say yes. Okay? And finally, you can use reactance to really grab attention, right? Don't buy this jacket. This was like a really famous ad. And if you were driving by this billboard, it would probably make you look twice. So when you can use reverse psychology to your advantage, something really unexpected, you can make it work in your favor, right? Attention is going to flow to anywhere there's something unexpected. Okay. So now I'm going to show you what all 7 ways look like in action. So now when you combine all 7 of those principles into a single sort of e-commerce experience, here's what it looks like. And so this is shopping quizzes. So this is our case study partner, golfhq.com, and this is a live quiz. So if you were to go there on your phone right now, you would see it on their men's shoe page and men's closeout shoe page. And then this is what their men's shoe page, typical e-commerce category page, looks like after we installed shopping quizzes on there. So as you can see, you're going from that scroll of thumbnail images to a visual question that has only 2 options that are very easy to process, spiked or spikeless. This is just a zoom in. And then after you answer that, it asks you a second question, if you want a sneaker style or dress shoe style. And then if you said sneaker style, it'll ask you if you want a colorful sneaker-looking golf shoe or a neutral sneaker-looking golf shoe. And then at the end, it'll say, here's your personal top 3 colorful, spikeless, athletic style golf shoes. So this comes back to the very first TLDR slide, which is that the brain likes fewer, better choices, right? So this is a really different user experience. And we know it works because it increased purchase conversions over the last holiday shopping season by 22%. So just to recap, these are the 7 ways. And if you want to see them all in action, if you want to see more examples of them all in action, you can go to shoppingquizzes.com. We have more live customer quizzes, and we also have some demos that are built on top of larger sort of brand name retailers, and they're actually all shoppable. So that's fun. In conclusion, just remember the hardware of online shopping is not this; it's the brain, and this is the user guide. Thank you. So I think we have time for a couple of questions. If there are any other questions, I know we're going to lose the room here in about 5 minutes. Yes.
When you talked about the process fluency, you said like 2 seconds or less is good for loading.
Yes.
For the steps in between to purchase, how many steps is like appropriate? Because I sometimes find it really annoying when there's like 1,000 steps before I get to the shopping cart.
Yes.
And with the shopping quiz, I noticed that you try to mitigate that with like the bar that goes to 100% and you know where the goal is. But how do you like measure what's appropriate length of stages?
Right. So that's a great question, because what people sometimes get wrong is they think fewer steps is the only thing that's important. Fewer steps is important, right? But fewer steps is not as important as the ease of each step, right? So we don't mind doing 8 steps if they feel really quick and easy, right? We would rather do 8 steps that feel easy than 6 steps that feel hard, right? So I'll give you an example. Like with shopping quizzes, we're asked all the time, like, well, can I get 4 options instead of 2? Like all of your quizzes are like white or wheat, V-neck or crew neck, you know, this or that, right? You know, can't we just do like one question and have 4 options? And we generally don't do that for a couple of reasons. One is because we're mobile first on our design, so we do take into account the device, right? But the other reason that we don't do that is because, it's because of processing fluency. So, for example, if you were going to buy a rug, so everybody picture your rug, you picture your couch at home, right? And you're going to buy a rug to go in front of that couch, right? And I'm going to give you 4 choices, okay? So you want warm tones, cool tones, grayscale, or neutrals, right? Versus if I ask it as 2 questions, and I say, okay, so first thing I want to ask you is, did you want something colorful or something neutral? And make that decision. And now, after all of you, let's just say this side of the room said neutral. So now I'm going to say, okay, so did you want warm earth tones or like grayscale, like black and white and grays, right? Which of those? And then if this whole side of the room said colorful, then I would say, okay, so now decide like cool tones like blues and greens, or do you want warm tones like reds and oranges, right? So it's an extra step, but it actually goes faster than asking the question with 4 choices, right? And so that's processing fluency, right? That really goes to speed. We all know what we like between white or wheat, but you throw in sourdough and pumpernickel and suddenly we're like, I don't know, say it again. Yes.
So when you went to the example and you threw up 3 shoes, I noticed the third one, the price, it went from like 50 to 60 to 195.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, was that intentional? Because that felt like it was a little bit, like suddenly it feels like it's out of my price range and I'm being guided.
You know, that's actually not intentional, right? So Golf HQ re-merchandises that quiz all the time, right?
Okay.
Like they switch up which 3 shoes they're showing there all the time. So, there's the functionality of shopping quizzes is to serve as a merchandising solution. So it's like a digital end cap for your e-commerce store, right? Because you can only sort of focus on so many things. So sometimes they'll put shoes in there that they just want to move.
Okay.
Yeah, but see, that's a good example of everybody brings their own sort of filter whenever given a choice of 3. Yes?
Would you recommend putting a filter for budget, or would that be, like for 2 choices, would that be a little too, like where would you put the anchor, like lower than 50 or higher than 50 or lower than 100?
There are a lot of ways to handle the price point question, right? Generally, by the time you're to a website, you already have accepted the price range of that website, or you wouldn't be there in the first place, right? So then you need to really ask yourself, how helpful is it to ask, because you have to pick a line, right? Like more than $40 or less than $40. And most people, they don't want to choose based on that, because if something was way better, they'd rather pay $41 than $39. So you want to ask the question in a different way, right? So for example, we did a quiz for a home furnishings company on rugs, and we gave the choice between flat leaf rugs and pile rugs. And the way that we gave the just-in-time explanation, right at the moment that they have to click one or the other, as we said, flat weave rugs are more affordable, pile rugs are more durable, right? So that tells you right there, like, is this something for like a rental that you're gonna throw away after 2 summers? Then you should probably pick this one. It's not quite as specific as saying, like, did you want a rug that was under $100 or over $100, right? Because most people would say it depends, right? Is it a better rug? And how do you know? So now you have to define better. So now you're to the real question. Was there a question over here?
Yeah, I know that many websites, they do a customized product selection when you go to the home page. Like if you bought shoes, you show shoes. That happens with Amazon all the time.
Yes.
But do you know any movement or a company that does customized experience? Like if I'm a client who likes to look at the ratings all the time and read what people write about it, do you give more space for that? Or if I just like to have to check 30 options before I make my decision, then you're going to give me more options at the front page, like customized experience, in addition to...
You know, I think there are a lot of companies that are trying to do like big data solutions to online shopping, right? And so, so I probably wouldn't be able to name any off the top of my head, but I know there are a lot of players in the space that think the algorithm is the solution for everything. We take a different perspective, right? We think that what we need to be modeling on is the preferences of the brain, not the capabilities of the database, right? And so that looks much more like human conversation, like when someone's standing in front of you in a store. How does that go? All right, well, I think that does it for our time today. Thank you so much for your questions.
On behalf of MRMA, GMA, and all of us in Carolyn, we just want